Now, Hyprland is a great piece of technology, but you see, a base install of Hyprland really lacks a lot of interesting tools that you would need in a day-to-day workflow. But you see, that's kind of the point of Hyprland and Linux in general. It's not about having a fully functioning desktop, it's about giving you something minimal, like a window manager, and having you configure the things that you love on top of that very base and minimal thing to get the workflow you want. I don't know what I'm doing with my hands. But either way, in this series on Hyprland, I'm trying to teach you how to configure Hyprland yourself so that you can have the experience you want. I'm not just gonna dump a huge configuration on you and have you figure it out. No, we're gonna learn this together. So in this episode, I'm gonna show you the essential tooling I think anyone needs in a base Hyprland install. We're gonna cover screenshots, we're gonna cover a notification daemon, we're also gonna go over a bunch of other stuff. So stick around, this will be fun. So here we are in our base install of Hyprland. Now, if you're following along, this is the thing that we have built in the first episode of this series. By the way, this is a series and this is episode 2. So if you haven't seen episode 1, then go and watch that episode and come back. I'll wait for you, I promise. But in this episode, we're gonna add great tooling to what we already have. So let's get started. So now, first things first, I wanna do a little bit of housekeeping and just sort of change a couple of things that I think would be helpful for me in my workflow. So now what I'm gonna do is open up my configuration. Now, if you remember, we installed Wafi and we can open it using Super R. Now we can enter the terminal that we want to enter, and that's Kitty. We installed that in the last episode. Let me just up my font a little bit here. And this is our terminal environment. Now, I want to edit my Hyprland configuration because there's a couple things I want to change for my personal ergonomics, and I'm going to do that by going into the config hyprland.config. So now I open this up in Neovim, and there's just a couple of things I want to change in here. Like, first of all, my file manager is actually not Dolphin. I'm starting with a GNOME base, and by default that ships with Nautilus, so I'm going to use Nautilus as my file manager. So I'm going to change my file manager to Nautilus. So now if I look for file manager in my configuration, I can type main mod E to exec file manager. Main mod is option, so I type option E and that opens up Nautilus. Okay, fantastic. Now I'll type option C to quit Nautilus. If you remember, option C will actually kill whatever active window you are on. So it's just a nice little shortcut for killing windows in Hyprland. Mod C, that's the main default way to do it. So now the next thing I want to change here is the key press I use to actually open my terminal. So in my configuration here, the default for opening my terminal, which is Kitty by the way, meow, the default for opening my terminal is main mod Q. Now that doesn't work for me. I like to use the carriage return, so I'm going to change Q to return. So now I'm going to write that file, and Hyprland will automatically reload my config. So if I do main mod return, now that will open my terminal. That's just a nice ergonomic thing I can do that I like. And speaking of ergonomics, I want to use my Vim keys to focus my active windows in my Hyprland configuration. I don't want to have to use my arrows. I'm a Vim guy. I don't use arrows. There's a piece of the configuration right here that goes over the key bindings for actually moving the focus of the windows. Right now it is bound to the left, right, up, down arrows. Actually, let's change this really quick because I like a different configuration. Left, down, up, right, or LDR for short. Now left, down, up, right is bound to the arrows, but what I want to do is bind these two Vim keys. Well, that's as simple as doing H for left, J for down, K for up, and L for right. So now I write that file, and if I open a new terminal with mod enter, I can then now just hold down my mod key, which is option for me, and do my Vim motions to go left and right. That's amazing. This is fantastic now. So now I can move my focus between my windows using my Vim keys, which is the same keys I use for Vim and for moving around things in Tmux. And it's just ergonomically fantastic. And I love setting this up with any tile window manager. And also now that I'm in here, I remember that the default key presses to open up my menu, which right here we can see that menu is set to Wafi -- show. If I search for menu, I can see that it is set to mod R. Now mod R isn't really a key press that I use. I like to use mod space. This actually brings me back to my Mac OS days. I would always use option space to open up Spotlight, and that's how I would open basically all my programs on Mac OS. So I want to make that mod space, and so now if I save that file, Hyprland will automatically reload it. Mod space will open up Wafi for me. Okay, that's fantastic, and I like it. And of course, Vim key bindings to get around my stuff. Command C to close that window. And man, we are good to go right now. We are just feeling good and we're looking good. I love it. Now, in the process of making this video, I was sure to learn a little bit about Hyprland every single day for some time. I think that's an incredible way to learn, and that's also the main point of today's sponsor, Brilliant. Learning a little every single day is one of the best things you can do, both for personal and professional growth. Brilliant helps you build real-world knowledge in minutes a day. It's the opposite of mindless scrolling. Now, I'm sure some of you watching this video may not be programmers yet, but Brilliant's growing number of programming courses are a great way to build foundations in real-world applications, like getting familiar with Python, which is the world's most widely used programming language right now. And you can start building programs on day one with a built-in drag-and-drop editor. It's really cool. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/typecraft. You can also scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description that we're going to leave down below. You'll also get 20% off an annual subscription. Okay, let's get back to configuring Hyprland. So now let's get to one of the pieces of tooling that I use every single day in my workflow. This might kind of sound a little bit weird, but we're building on things here. The one tool that I think I use all the time that's always missing in window managers and that I can't always find a good one is how to take a screenshot of your screen. This might sound a little bit weird, but honestly, every single window manager, every desktop environment, I always wonder like, what is the best one? So I feel like it's a nice thing for me to just sort of give to you what I've been using, which is a tool called hyprshot. Now, hyprshot is a really great utility to take screenshots in Hyprland using your mouse. Now, it allows you to do all the normal things like taking screenshots of windows, of regions, of your whole entire monitors, and it's pretty nice. Now, under the hood, it really just uses Grim to take the screenshot and a tool called Slurp to select the thing that you are going to screenshot. But all together, it makes a really, really great tool. So let's install hyprshot. Now for me, I'm using Arch Linux. By the way, I'm using Arch Linux, by the way. So I will use Pacman, but for me, I like to use the front end for Pacman called Yay. So I'm gonna install hyprshot with Yay. It is under Yay, hyprshot. And of course, it downloads some dependencies. I can just hit enter and enter to go through all this stuff, put in my password, nobody look, proceed with installation. And there we go. Hyprshot should be installed now. How do we use it? Well, thankfully, it's fairly straightforward. We can run a couple of commands to test it out, and then let's bind certain keys to these commands in our configuration so that we can then use it easily moving forward. So now that we've installed hyprshot, how do we actually use it? Well, hyprshot's pretty easy to use. We just type hyprshot-h to get our help, and we can actually see here that we can take shots in certain modes. So let's type hyprshot-m for mode, and we want to select, let's say, a window. Now when we type this, what happens is our mouse is going to select a window for us. So let's just move over to a different window, and we can take a picture of this window by clicking on the mouse. So we click the mouse, and I think that took a picture. Now we can open our file manager, which we set to mod key E, remember, just a little bit earlier in this video. And so we go open our file manager, we go to pictures. This is the default place where hyprshot is going to store images. And this is our picture right here. Perfect. This is fantastic. This is a great piece of functionality for our system. Personally, I use this stuff all the time. I love to take pictures of things and then tweet about them. In fact, I'm gonna just tweet about this right now. Let's type first pick with hyprshot. Yay! And then we can add our picture from, by the way, you hold down main mod and drag when you want to drag a floating window like this in Hyprland. And there we go. Now we have tweeted a picture of our desktop, which is something I do every single day. So now taking the screenshot was great and all, but I wasn't really notified that that screenshot was taken. I don't know if you remember, but we actually didn't know that it was taken. It just sort of stopped running the program by clicking on the mouse. So we clicked the mouse, and I think that took a picture. So the next tool that I think is going to be essential in our toolkit for Hyprland is a notification daemon. Now, I've tried a couple of them, and the most straightforward one that I've found is the Sway Notification Center, which is Sway NC. Now, Sway NC is a fantastic notification daemon that looks like it just produces very nice, modern-looking notifications, and it looks awesome. I want this on my system. So let's install Sway NC. Once again, I use Arch, by the way, so we can install Sway NC using Yay, S, Sway NC. We can enter our password and Sway NC gets installed. Now, SwayNC is really interesting. It's a notification daemon specifically written for the Wayland compositor. This doesn't work for X11, but for Wayland, this will work for us. Now, we needed something special for Wayland because we are running this machine in Wayland. That's what Hyprland runs on. Hyprland is a compositor for the Wayland ecosystem, so we need a notification daemon that works for the Wayland ecosystem. That's where SwayNC comes into play. Now that SwayNC is installed, we want to test it out a little bit just to make sure it's working. So let's try to just run SwayNC in our terminal and see what happens. Okay, not a whole lot happened, but I think it's running. So let's test it out by opening another terminal, and we can talk about how SwayNC works and interacts with the rest of your system. You see, SwayNC is just a notification daemon, but we actually need another library that sends notifications to this daemon. Now, I installed GNOME on the system, and GNOME ships by default with libnotify. That is the library that notifies the daemon when things happen. So when a notification gets created, libnotify is going to send a notification to our daemon, and then the daemon is the thing that then displays the notification to us. That's what SwayNC does. Now we can test a notification message by typing notify -send and our message. This is a notification. Now, if everything's working correctly and SwayNC is hooked up correctly, when I hit enter here, it should create a notification on my screen. And sure enough, it does. Isn't this fantastic? This is SwayNC creating a notification based on a message sent to it by libnotify. This is fantastic. So now whenever we have notifications on our system, we should now get notifications through SwayNC. Now let's try to take a picture with hyprshot and see if we can actually get these notifications on our system. Let's take a picture with hyprshot over here. And sure enough, screenshot saved. How fantastic is that? This is working great so far. Okay, so now we've installed two tools that work really well together. Let's make sure that they run when Hyprland starts, or in the term of hyprshot, let's bind it to a nice key so that we can run it whenever we want. So we can open up our configuration for Hyprland, which is config hyprland.conf, and we can scroll down to where we see an exec once example here. Now already from the last episode, we ran exec once for waybar. This means that Hyprland is going to execute waybar whenever it starts up. Now let's add another program after waybar called SwayNC. That's the program we just installed. This will ensure that every time we start Hyprland, we will start SwayNC and waybar. Easy enough. And for hyprshot, I want to actually just bind some key presses so that I can take screenshots of my computer whenever I want to. So let's go down to where we set our key binds, and we can just add a couple more in here. So down here, let's bind. Let's just say the print key on its own. We want to bind that to exec hyprshot, and we want to have the, let's say we can take pictures of a whole entire window when we do print like that. Okay, so that's hyprshot window. So now we can test this by typing our print key, and we can see that, yep, hyprshot's working. If I click, that takes a picture of whatever that is. SwayNC is running, so that showed me the notification that the screenshot was saved. This is fantastic. Now, one more key bind I like to have for hyprshot is when I type shift print, I actually want to take a picture of a region defined by my mouse. Now this brings me back again to my Mac OS days where I typed, I think it was shift, command, and 4. That actually took a screenshot if I drag my mouse. But now with Hyprland, I can do shift and print key, and now I can drag my mouse across the screen and take pictures of things that I define by dragging my mouse. Fantastic. So that gives me a lot of functionality with taking screenshots and, you know, everything else. All right, so now we have a fun little tool in hyprshot because now we can take pictures of our desktop and then share them to obviously Twitter, and everyone's gonna love them, and we're gonna become super popular because we're just sharing stuff on Twitter from our desktop. So cool. But now what I wanna do is actually install something extremely useful, what I think everyone needs in a setup. I'm talking about a lock screen. Now by default, Hyprland doesn't come with any kind of a locking mechanism, but for me, whenever I get up from my computer, I like to lock my screen so no one else can see what I'm doing. I'm clearly working on very important things, and I don't want anyone else to see that. So I want to install a lock screen. Well, this is a great time to introduce the Hyper ecosystem of tooling. Now, Hyprland has its own ecosystem of tools that were developed that are preferred tools for certain features in Hyprland. There's a few of them here. There's hyperpaper, which we're going to be covering in the next episode, so stick around for that. There's hyperpicker, which allows you to pick a color from your desktop. There's hypridle, which is what we're going to talk about after this, and then there's hyprlock. Now, hyprlock is a tool that will create a lock screen for your computer. So let's install hyprlock and let's go over a little bit about how it works. So you can install hyprlock with me. I'm using Arch, so I can do yay s hyprlock, and this will install hyprlock for me. Okay, there we go. Now hyprlock is installed. So now after we've installed hyprlock, the first thing we're going to want to do is create our hyprlock config file. Now this configuration file will live in config hyper, and it's going to be called hyprlock.conf. So let's create that file, and then we can go back to the documentation for hyprlock to just get some ideas of how to get started. There's a lot of configurations that already exist for hyprlock. I'm not going to show you any configuration that already exists. We're just going to build a simple one just to get you off your feet, and then you can look these up yourself later. Or you can come to our next episode where we're actually going to show you a beautiful config that I use on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so now hyprlock, the configuration is comprised of widgets, and each widget defines a thing that you're going to see on the screen. So you can define background as a widget, or you can also define your image as a widget. You can also define a shape or an input field. So for us, we're just going to do something simple. We're going to copy this background section here from the config examples, and we're going to add it to our Hyprland hyprlock config. So let's just paste that. We're going to delete this path to an image because there's no image that we're going to display. I don't really have anything saved on this machine. And then from here, the next thing we want to do is make sure we actually show an input field. So I'm just going to copy this section as well. Actually, I can click this button and I'm going to paste it into our configuration. And it's as simple as that. Now I just want to delete this fade on empty section, or at least set it to false, because I want my input to show all the time. So now if I type hyprlock, what's going to happen is my screen fades and all I have is an input field. This is great. So now if I just type my password, boom, hyprlock has worked. It has unlocked my computer. This is fantastic. So now let's set a key bind to hyprlock so that we can just lock our computer anytime we stand up and, leave or do whatever we want. Maybe we're going to go outside sometime. Probably not, but if we do, we want to lock our computer. So let's go to config hyprland.conf and let's bind a key to use hyprlock. So down in our key bind section down here, we can bind a new key. I'm going to bind super_shift, which is shift and super key. I'm going to exec hyprlock. Oh, that's incorrect. That's right. I want super shift L to stand for lock to exec hyprlock. You can see that I actually got some feedback at the very top of my screen saying that that was an incorrect configuration for Hyprland. So that's good. Now if I type shift super L, boom, my computer is locked. Now I can just type my password. Definitely messed that up. And then there we go. Now I'm back in my machine. Hyprlock is fantastic. And now the last tool I want to talk about that I think is essential for any Linux setup is an idling mechanism. We want our computer, at the very least my laptop here, to be able to hibernate and shut down its monitor whenever you're not using it for a certain amount of time. Now Hyprland has a great program already in the Hyper ecosystem called hypridle. Hypridle is pretty fantastic, so let's go ahead and install it. So let's quit this and type yay s hypridle, and this will install our idling tool for Hyprland. All right, great. So now hypridle is installed. Let's look at the documentation really quick. So the configuration is done through a config file at hypridle.conf, which is very similar to all the configurations we have. So let's actually open up that file right now. I just copied that file path from the configuration and created it using Neovim to open an empty file here. And what's really interesting with hypridle is the concept of listeners. You can set a listener to do all number of things, right? You can actually set a listener to send a notification that your screen is about to be turned off. You can turn down the brightness of your keyboards, and you can do this all based on a timeout attribute. And that timeout is a number of seconds. So after, let's say 2 minutes, you get a notification saying that your screen's about to turn off. And then after 5 minutes, your screen will turn off. Let's look at how this works. So we have a basic configuration right here, and it looks like this will set our monitor backlight to a minimum, and it will do that based on the time that will happen here. So let's test out this configuration and how it can work in real time. Now I want to define a listener in my config file. Let me see, this is the correct way to do it, right? Yes, a listener. And I want to open and close the squiggly braces. And this listener is going to have a timeout attribute. Now this timeout, I want to actually just set to like, I don't know, 2 seconds because I'm just going to try something here. And then I want to set the on timeout attribute. So on dash timeout, I want to actually notify send your screen is idle. And then I want to have an on resume, I believe it is. And on resume, I want to say, yes, you have resumed. So let's change this to you have resumed. Now this is just a test. I just want to see how hypridle works. Okay, great. So now if I open up a new terminal here and just type hypridle, if I type that correctly, what should happen here is after 2 seconds, I should get a notification. And of course, you see in the top right hand of my screen is idle. Now, if I move my mouse around, it sends another notification that I have resumed. So this is really interesting. And we can use this to actually build a configuration to do what we want. Now, basically, all I really want is that after a certain amount of time, let's call it 5 seconds for now, I want to just lock my screen. And there's a section here that shows how this works. There's a command, I believe it's called login cuddle lock session. Now that will actually lock our session when we time out for the listener that locks our session. So let's paste that in here, remove the on resume section, and now let's run hypridle in another window. Now, what's going to happen here is after 5 minutes, it should lock my screen. Let's see. Did I say minutes? I meant seconds. Now, nothing happened there because I actually forgot to set the general section of my configuration. It explains it up here. We actually want to set our lock command to be hypercuddle because that is the locking mechanism we are going to use. So in general, we want to set our lock command to hyperlock. So let's go over here. Let's create a new section called general. And in general, we want to copy and paste the lock command to be hyperlock. Great. So now if we run hypridle, it should lock our screen after 5 seconds. And there we go. It has now locked our screen. Now we enter our password and boom, that's great. Now let's exit hypridle and let's set this timeout to something a little more reasonable, like 300 seconds. That'll be a little bit better for us. So now after 300 seconds, if I'm not around my computer, it's going to lock my session. Fantastic. Now that's just a sneak peek of one of the things you can do with hypridle. There are a ton of possibilities with this listener mechanism that we have here. You can do so many things when it comes to idling your system. You can hibernate your system. You can suspend system cuddle. You can do all kinds of stuff. So now in our configuration for Hyprland, we want to make sure we run one more thing. And that is, of course, under our exec once here, we want to add hypridle to our list of things that we run whenever we start up Hyprland. So now in this Hyprland config, we can take screenshots. We have better ergonomics using Vim movements. We can actually see our notifications using sway NC. We can lock our system whenever we get out and touch some grass. And our idle mechanism works so that our computer will shut down or hibernate whenever we aren't around it for a certain amount of time. Now, this, I think, are the essential tools that you need to have a fully functioning desktop environment, and it works fantastic on Hyprland. Now, if you want to see us make this configuration look beautiful, then stick around for the next episode. And hey, thanks, nerds.